have also started the webinar. So right now it's right on time. And so good evening to peers and colleagues in Southeast Asia. And good morning to everyone in Bloomington at IU. Thank you for attending today's webinar. It is as part of a webinar series organized by the IU ASEAN office. I'm Farida Pawan, the academic director of the office and professor of education in Bloomington. And Peter Bunjaran, who's the director in Bangkok, and I welcome you to the series. And our guests today are Professors Sun-Young Shin and Professor Punchalee Wasanasomsithi. And so Professor Shin is an associate professor in second language studies here at IU Bloomington. And Professor Punchalee, I'm going to use your first name as is a norm in Thailand.
Okay, sure. Yes.
Is an associate professor in the English language program at Chulalongkorn University in Bangkok. And so they are both going to engage us in a very interesting and thoughtful conversation about language assessment in Thailand, as well as in terms of the collaboration between IU and universities in Thailand in terms of identifying and researching learner-oriented language assessment. And so before we can start, I'd just like to say that this webinar, the format is 30-minute conversation between our guests, and then we will have a 20-minute Q&A with the audience members. The audience members, you can post questions on the Q&A page anytime, and when it's time for the Q&A session, we'll forward them to our guest speakers. And so with that, Professors Shin and Professor Punchalee, welcome, and please take it away. Language assessment in Thailand.
Okay, thank you for having me and Ajahn Punchalee. So today we're going to talk about what are the issues and challenges we encounter for language assessment in Thailand. But I want to kind of emphasize, I want to leave with kind of impression that, oh my God, Thailand has so many problems in language assessment. That's not really the case, because all these issues and challenges we're going to discuss is applicable to other EFL countries around the world. So I wanted to start with emphasize that the English proficiency is a very important for many Thai students, because English is kind of becoming is a lingua franca in many Asian countries. So to keep up with those countries in this region, it's very important that Thai students be able to communicate effectively in English. But then to help them to achieve their goals as testers and teachers, we have to track down their proficiency level, assess their most updated English proficiency, to identify their the needs, to provide the best support for them. So language assessment is very important in the language educations. But then we're going to talk about today is, so we all acknowledge that language assessment, English language teaching is important, but what are the issues we're dealing with, particularly language assessment practices and also research in Thailand. So I want to just start with asking these questions to Ajahn Punchalee, that, so what are the really common issues, important common issues in the Thailand right now in terms of language assessment?
Okay, thank you for having me. Right. Okay, the issues that we are facing in Thailand right now, right? Part of it, right, is that we are trying, right, to find, well, we should not say the word best, right, but the most effective way, right, to assess language proficiency of our students, right? In the old days, right, we rely on standardized tests from the Western world, right? We use TOEFL, we use IELTS, right? And these days, right, we still use them, right? But we are for example, at Chulalongkorn University, right, we have developed our own in-house proficiency tests, right, to use as one of the criteria, right, for students' admissions. In addition, student can choose whether they would want to take TOEFL or IELTS if they are going to enter the university in the, for the international programs, right, that we offer.
Mhm. Yeah.
So, and the one of the main issue right now is that since the adoption, right, of the common European frameworks of references, the CFR, right, since 2014 by the Ministry of Education, right, that changed the way that we assess our students, right? When we talk about English proficiency, right now we have to use CFR as the criteria, right? When we determine the levels of proficiencies of our students at different levels. Actually, not just the teachers, but not just the students, but also the teachers as well, right? The teachers are required, English teachers, right, in schools are required by the Ministry of Education, right, to also take the test, standardized test, right, and then to determine their proficiency levels based on CFR.
Right. So it is important to assess both students and teachers' English proficiency to make sure that they're really functional English as a student and teacher. But the problem is that the paper that I wrote with Ajahn Anand a couple of years ago, the English proficiency test from like commercial providers like ETS or Cambridge can be too expensive for Thai students to take. And plus, like preparing those tests can also very costly and very time consuming. And unfortunately, if you're from the rural areas in Thailand or outside Bangkok, not all Thai students have equal access to necessary resources. So I think that to get around these problems, many Thai universities start with creating their own test. And then the advantage of developing these locally developed tests is they can incorporate more culturally appropriate context for the Thai students. But then the quality of this test has been also called into the questions, right? Because it is important that those tests should also meet the rigorous standards for like reliability, validity, as the other commercial available tests do. So I think that it's very important to like conducting regular quality checks up and make sure that the test quality meet the basic needs. And it's also important to make these quality reportings available, publicly available, so that people can choose which test they can take and they have more confidence about their test result. I noticed that some Thai universities have already taken these important steps. So I think that other universities should follow this similar process to make sure that their test quality is as good as the other common commercially available English proficiency test.
Yes, that's true. Because, for example, if you are taking the CUTEP, which is Chulalongkorn University test of English proficiency, right? The cost of registration, right, is like $30, right? But if you are going to take the IELTS, for example, right, you have to pay more than $200, right? $200, which is a lot, right? And not all Thai students can afford that, right? Especially they might not pass the test the first time they take it, right? So part of it is that at Chulalongkorn University, for example, we have our own test, and we understand the significance, right, of test validation, right? And then we have conducted research, right? We have done standard setting, right? We have equated the test to make sure, right, to make sure that our tests, right, are standardized, right, valid, reliable, right? Because these tests, we realize that it's a high stake test. For example, the CUTEP, right? It determines the future, the life of the students, right? very
Yeah.
high stake test. Yes.
Right. Right. So I
So we try
definitely,
to ensure
yeah,
the quality,
right.
yes, of the
I
test.
definitely agree with
But the
that.
problem, one of the problem is that like
Yes.
we don't have that right now, right? That many experts in language
Yeah.
assessment and
Right.
evaluations. That
Right.
a small group of professors are interested in this.
Right.
When we think about ourselves, right? Most of the time, when we think of ourselves as language teachers, right, we focus on the teaching side, right, not on the assessment side. Right?
Yeah. And that's why IU and Chula has collaborated on many initiatives over the years about the language assessment research and practices, and we're continuing on this partnership as well. So I think I agree with that. These localized, developed English proficiency tests in Thailand offer more accessible and then the localized alternative to commercially available English proficiency test. And then you also pointed out that there are a lot of standard setting studies. For those who are not familiar with what standard settings about among the attendees, so the standard setting is like you setting the CUS score to align your test score with the CFR levels or other commonly accepted English proficiency benchmark. So the many testers want to align their test scores to the CFR levels, mainly to achieve some kind of a transferability and the transparency of the test score. So their test scores can be recognized internationally, or at least domestically in Thailand. But what I found that the problems doing standard setting study, not only in Thailand, it could be in other places. So when it comes to setting the CUS score, that link the test score with the CFL levels, many tests rely on the subjective judgment of the panelist without necessarily taking into account the content of the test. So for example, like very decontextualized vocabulary tests or grammar tests can also be aligned with the CFL levels. But then the scores obtained from those tests not necessarily reflect the student's functional proficiency, which was described in the level descriptors in the CFR. So I think it is very important to be kind of aware that the alignment of test scores doesn't necessarily guarantee that the test is measuring the skills that are needed to use the language effectively in the kind of practical situations. So it is important to construct the test based on the CFR from the get-go, so that we have more confidence in the interpreting test scores in terms of the CFR levels. Right.
At Chula right now, right, we realize the significance of language assessment and evaluation, and we are actually trying to, I use that the word groom, right? We are trying to right, encourage, right, our staff members, right, to develop their expertise in language assessment and evaluation, and we are eagerly recruiting, right, new faculty members, right, who have their degrees or their educational background in language assessment.
Right. Yeah, Chula is a leading institute in the Thailand in many aspects, and plus, I mean, in language assessment, they now have their own language center, and they have some great emerging scholars and who has expertise in language assessments. But you mentioned in previous your talk that many Thai graduate students and researchers feel kind of more intimidated about the language assessment, right? Do you have any idea why it's the case?
Okay, when lots of teachers, right, they feel that language assessment and evaluation is something like beyond their capability, right? If they think of themselves as language teachers, they feel that they are good at the language part, right? They love teaching, but they are not good at math, for example. They are not good at statistics, right? So right now at Chula, right, we are encouraging our faculty members to conduct more research in language assessment. And we try to tell them that even our graduate students, right, we try to encourage them, persuade them to get to know more about language assessment and evaluation. And that it doesn't mean working with statistics or numbers all the time, right? We try to tell them, okay, that might be on the language assessment of learning and assessment for learning, right? So students and even new faculty members are encouraged to conduct research more, probably on the qualitative side, right? We are talking about like learning-oriented assessment, dynamic assessment, right? Performance integrated assessment, or assessment literacy of different groups of stakeholders like teachers, pre-service, in-service, or even, right, other people involved.
Yeah. So it is not just common for Thai students, but like including in my graduate students at IU, they feel like language assessment is really kind of intimidating, more intimidating than other areas of applied linguistics, because I think they believe that language assessment is just all about statistics and numbers. But I think, as you mentioned, that it's important that language assessment is beyond just numbers, right? So I think this is important to acknowledge that the scope of language assessment is much broader, and it also includes a range of like qualitative considerations as well. So, I mean, the quantitative, like numbers, is important to track their progress, but the qualitative considerations are just as important for providing some comprehensive profile of students' language abilities. So I think we have to like emphasize and highlight that language assessment as a tool for helping students to achieve their learning goals, but another like daunting barriers or obstacles to be overcome. Yeah. Okay. And then you just mentioned about like learning-oriented assessment or dynamic assessment. So my question is, so those kind of a formative assessment is a popular topic for research, and has those formative assessment actually incorporated into language classroom?
Yes, right. To begin with, right, quite a large number of our doctoral students, right, are working on these alternative assessment, like dynamic assessment, right, performance integrated assessments, right? Something that they feel that, okay, it's more right, within their reach, within their grasp, right? Or learning oriented assessment. And yeah, I have seen some of the graduates, right, who become English instructors at different universities, right, make use of what they have found out, what they have learned during the process of, right, conducting their doctoral dissertation research, right, into the actual practice. And we also encourage our new faculty members and even faculty members who have more experience, right, to look into these opportunities, right, not just focusing on the teaching side, right, because a teaching and assessment go together. It's like, and then yeah, of course, there are different form of assessment that would inform the teachers, right, of the students' progress. For example, we tell them, okay, with formative assessment, maybe, right, they can even become better teacher because they have more opportunities to help students while they are still in the progress of learning, right? If you use summative assessment like midterm and final exams, maybe by the time you realize, right, you get a proof or evidence of students' level proficiency, maybe it's too late to do anything to help them, right? It's the end of the semester, so you just see the score and then bye, right? Yeah, the semester ends. So it's the students become the problem of the teachers in the following semester, right?
Right. Why do you have to wait until the end of the unit? Of course, right? You have to help them while they're still learning, right? So that's the kind of value of a formative assessment. And I'm glad to see that there are many researchers coming out about these issues, learning-oriented assessment and the dynamic assessment. And I also noticed that in July and other Thai universities, there are many English for specific purposes that courses provide for students. So I was wondering if there are any issues about teaching and assessing those ESP courses at Chula or other Thai universities?
Okay, at Chula, right? For the first year students, they are taking just general foundation English courses, but
Mhm.
when they are in the second and third year, they are taking English for specific courses, specific purposes course, right? And of course, there are problems with assessment because not all teachers, right, are language assessors. And even worse, right? Some of them have the misconception that, okay, if they know how to teach, it means they can test, which is something that it's not true, right? Not always the case. So we have to deal with teachers sometimes, right, who don't know how to assess student, right? Appropriately, accurately, or reliably, or credibly. For example, we have some teachers who don't understand that, okay, if you are teaching a course, ESP course, for example, right, you have to make sure that the students, right, have accomplished, right, the course objectives, right, by the end of the course, right, and the test need to reflect those objectives, right, of the course, right. Some teachers, right, test something that they have not taught during the semester, right. Some teachers have a misconception that the tests have to be very, very difficult because they are teaching students with higher level of abilities or proficiencies.
Right.
So there are all sorts of things. Others may not even know how to write multiple choice items, right? Right. There are different issues. Yeah, we have
I
to deal
think that
with like day in, day out.
you made a really important point that the teaching and more like assessing is very like challenging, especially in the ESP context, because you have to teach actually both like language and then the subject matter content at the same time. And then it's important to make sure that these courses kind of tailor to meet their specific like needs of students who from like medicine, aviation, law, engineering, right? So I think it's kind of difficult or challenging to kind of strike a balance between language knowledge and then topical knowledge. So as a language teacher or tester, you have to have a certain level of understanding of the subject matter of that you're teaching, right?
Yes, exactly. Yeah, that's a difficult part, right? Challenging part of being ESP teachers, right? Because you need to know the content of it. At Chula, we have like 22 faculties and programs, right? So if we're teaching students in the faculty of medicine, right, we need to understand all the roots, prefixes, and suffixes, right, that describe different body parts or different diseases, right, that we have never heard of in this life, right? And if you teach students in the faculty of law, right, you have to understand all legal terms, how the cases can be executed, prosecuted, right? Something like that, right? So it's or if you are right now, I'm writing a book, right, a textbook for students in the faculty of architecture. So I have to understand, I have to learn about different parts of the buildings, what this part is called, what the other structure is called, something like that. Right. So it's part of being a job, right, of ESP teachers. But content is one thing, right? And writing the test is another thing, right?
When it
Lots of
comes
us find that it's easier to develop content knowledge, right?
Yeah, so that's kind of really the challenging part of teaching and assessing ESP. And it also found that it is important to ensure that the authenticity of an ESP assessment. So when you develop a task or criteria, it is important to use some kind of genuine criteria, rating criteria tasks that reflect the real world demands of the field. So I remember that Ajahn Thai from Chula did a very interesting dissertations about
pharmaceutical science.
Validating and developing that kind of role play task for the pharmaceutical students, and her task is really based upon the needs analysis and task analysis, what pharmaceutical students actually do in the real world. And then she really incorporated the input from the industry experts and then reflect that the kinds of tasks students will expect to perform in the field later. So I found that those kind of studies are very fascinating. Okay. The last kind of thing that I wanted to also talk about is about the technology in language assessment. So these days, people really like excited or complained about like using ChatGPT or other like technology in language teaching and assessment. So I was wondering if there are any like issues in using technology in language assessment in Thailand.
At Chula right now, right, we are trying to come up with change the format of the test, right? CU TAP, right? Our test right now, right, is paper-based, right? We are in the process of developing. Actually, the director and her team, right, is exploring different options right now, right, of what we can do, right, to change the format of the test to make it maybe use more technology. We're in the process of talking to different companies, right?
So the format of a test is
yes, because we realize that we
changing.
need that, right? We need to make it computer-based.
Right. So now it used to be really paper-based. Now is changed to computerized, web-based, maybe adaptive test if the technology.
Yes, adaptive test as well.
Is available.
Yes.
Right. Yeah.
Yes.
So I think that like these days when it comes to like using technology for language assessments, to me, it feel like the tail is wagging the dog, right? So we create the task that easily scored by machines. So in other words, I think that I forgot the name of the researcher, but she said that our language tests become more technology driven rather than technology enhanced. So we become a slave to technology rather than the owner of the technology. I think that we have to emphasize that we utilize technology in a way that improve the accuracy and validity and authenticity of the test, not just focusing too much
make it more
about like
accessible.
efficiency. Yeah.
Yes, and make the test. Maybe technology will make the help make the test more accessible to
right.
wider,
so that's
right, people.
I know it's a little
population.
debatable, but I mean, we may think about using ChatGPT or now GPT-4 as a passage creator or item creator, although those should be vetted by the human raters later, but that will definitely enhance the efficiency. Yeah.
Yeah,
right.
I agree. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that we is running out of time, but I think that we have to kind of really highlight that IU and Jula have collaborated on many initiatives over the past like 4 or 5 years, right? So we've organized many faculty student exchanges, hosted guest lectures and seminars, and we co-hosting conferences like big conference like upcoming LTRC in Bangkok, Thailand 2025. And then these collaborations, I think they're mutually beneficial for both institutions. And we look forward to continuing our partnership with Jula and exploring new opportunities for collaboration in the future.
Okay. We always feel fortunate, actually, right, to have met you and
and fortunate for met you and all
from
the
IU,
excellent Chula faculties and students
who can help us with the especially when Cooley or the Language Institute at Chula, right, has the goal of becoming a center of excellence in language assessment, right? And we have just set up the Language Assessment Research Center. And of course, we so look forward to further collaboration with IU, as always.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. Yes, thank you.
So okay, now, at this point in time, the Q&A session, And so I think that we have devices, several devices with questions popping up, and this is part of because your discussion has been so interesting. There've been many questions that have popped up, and so one of them I'd like to take from the Q&A page here from Isabel, and her question is: what are concrete examples in which the introduction of the CEFR changed the assessment of proficiency in Thailand? And perhaps you could also explain what CEFR is for those new to the assessment world. But that's the question.
Okay.
Okay. See, you want to explain what CFR is, Chin?
Okay, so yeah, thank you, Isabel, for questions. So Isabel is my colleague at the Second Language Studies, and so the CFR stands for Common European Reference or Framework for Languages. So this is external language proficiency benchmark that distinguish language proficiency from A1 to C2. So it has a 6 main levels of language proficiency. So it's similar to ACFL guidelines in the US. But is much more widely used in Europe and nowadays all around the world. So the question is, so give me the real specific examples of how using CFR changed the assessment practices or research in Thailand.
Okay, as you use one word, right? Benchmark, right? CFR is used as a benchmark for language assessment in Thailand, right? Right now, for example, right, we use it to determine different level of proficiency that students at different grade levels need to be achieved. For example, right, if you are in grade elementary school, grade 4 to grade 6, right, the level, your level of proficiency should be A1, right? If you are in early secondary school, right, your proficiency need to be A2. And for students who complete high school, their CFR proficiency level should be B1. And not only students, right? The Ministry of Education, right, since its adoption of CFR in 2014, right, has determined that teachers also need to take a standard English test to determine their level of proficiency. For example, if they are going to teach elementary school, right? If they're going to teach elementary students, they need to have at least B1 level of proficiency. If they're going to teach secondary school, they need B2. And if they are going to teach at maybe international school, international programs, or bilingual schools in Thailand, right? They need C1 level CFR. So these things, right, never existed before, right? We use it now as like benchmark. The teachers and students have to take proficiency tests, standardized tests, and then, right, we can determine the level based on the test scores, right?
Well, excellent. So
and it changed everything as a part of it.
Yes, obviously. And so there's another question that came on my on another device, which is based on the article that I think Shin co-authored with Chai Surya. And the question is the concept of localization, and that paper mentioned that although there was localization of dialects and whatnot to kind of accommodate to try and make it work for Thai audiences, the scores between localized accents used in those localized tests and native speaker, quote unquote, native speaker accents, there wasn't much difference. Is there something you want to comment on?
I'm not sure if I mentioned about the accents in that paper. But anyway, I could answer that question. So I think that in the locally developed in the language English test in Thailand, I don't think they always, especially for the listening test, they all use the native speakers speech as an input. I noticed that there are British English accent and American English accent, but that's it. I don't think they have Thai accented English speakers as a test input. But I would I would definitely recommend to use the more diverse variety of English as their test input, because those are the actual English language learners in Thailand exposed to. So unless they're really highly intelligible, I would recommend to use those kind of a different variety of English as a legitimate listening test input to enhance authenticity of the test.
Yes. Yeah, I agree. Because actually, when we talk about, right, okay, when we are developing the test, right, we never have to find someone, right, to do the listening part of the test, right, to record the scripts, right. We always look for, well, native speakers, either, as you said, British or American to do the job, right. But I agree that, yeah, maybe the students need to be exposed, right, to different accents, right, because that's, as Chin said, right, increase the authenticity of the test.
Mm.
Right. I also want to add that I think that another paper that I put it, I think that Park et al. We published in language testing last year. At IU, we use the unscripted audio visual input as a listening input, that we really increase the authenticity, because that's the lecture the IU students will watch and ask to process, understand. And then we found that we were able to achieve the similar level of reliability even using those kind of unscripted audiovisual listening test input. So I think that I believe that Thailand has such kind of at least technology capacity to implement those inputs. So we have to kind of try it out. We have to be a little bit more innovative to a kind of a little risk taker.
Yes,
Yeah, so
that's
the
a word,
field.
right? That's a word, risk taker, right?
Yeah.
Because there's still some misconception as well, right? Like I'm in charge of international programs, right, at Chula. There's still lots of parents who believe that, right, if they pay more, right, to send their children to the international program, not the Thai program, right, the English instructors need to be native speakers, right? They even say they need someone with blonde hair. Sometimes they even specify that. But in fact, right, Thai people use English, right, to communicate with people who are not native speakers, but they are speakers of other languages, right?
Well,
There's still misconception that, yeah, the native speakers would be the best variety or something.
it's interesting that
we have to change
three of
that.
us are non-native speakers of English. Talking
Yes,
about the
I
test
know.
of English, I just want to point that out to the audience. There's another question from Isabel, which is two other questions. One is how the best training for teachers in assessment in Thailand. What are some of your thoughts?
What's that again? The training?
How do you train teachers? What are the best examples of best practices in training teachers to assess?
When we talk about teacher training, right, we kind of, for example, at Chula, right, we try to, organize different training sessions all the times, right? If like Chen, you may realize that, right, from working with us, that sometimes we even invite, right, Shin to Chula, right, and to conduct training, because we train the trainer for one thing. We also train teachers who would be, right, teachers of other teachers. Like we have a master's degree program, doctoral degree programs, right, and part of it, right, we have a language assessment, right, as a tract that would be in charge of this. And we our students in these graduate programs, right, most of them become teachers after graduations, right? And at Chula, we have a teacher training program all the time on language assessment, because in addition to teaching, but we later on we kind of realize that we need to work more, try harder with the language assessment side, right? Because it's very important, right? It actually, as I said, we work with high stake tests, right? We determine lots of students' lives, right, in our hands, right? That the test score would determine their future career, right? What they're going to do after graduation, or whether they would be able to get admitted into the program. Lots of things, right? That we are working with, and we believe that yes, language assessment is very important. But as I told you before, right, that not many people are keen on language assessment, or are not interested in it, or feel that it's too intimidating for them, right? So we are dealing with correcting their misconception, right? Showing that there are things that they can work with, right? And then it's not something that beyond their grasp, right? And make them realize the significance of this. And we organize a teacher training program all the time. Even next month at Chula, there will be a big project, right? Training teachers on how to assess their students, right? And we always work with different organizations, sometimes even with the US Embassy, right? Yeah, with support from different organizations.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So the follow-up question to that is, Sun-Young, what are some of the things that you do in those training sessions?
Right. So I noticed that there are a lot of webinars, and then the talks in Thailand. So I think that the Thai language teachers and students and researchers have so much resources. But what I noticed that if you go to a webinar, and then you'll get some knowledge, but you kind of become really passive. So I think that it's important to learn something out of like really hands-on activities. So I always emphasize that you start with the actual items and identify what problems you found, and how would you develop your own items, and how would you criticize the existing test. So I think that we have to have those kind of a hands-on activity component in the training sessions. And usually I always start with talking about some basic fundamental principles of language assessment, like what is construct, what is reliability, validity, and then I quickly move on to so how do we generate, create, develop test items. So how to create the item specifications, and what aspects of quality of the language assessment we have to pay attention to. But I want again to highlight that we have a more really hands-on activities, so they become more active researcher and then practitioner.
Mm-hmm. So there's along those lines. Sorry, Punchalee, I'm sort of jumping in.
No, I just want to mention one thing, that lots of language teachers at university level in Thailand, English language teachers or instructors, right? Lots of them do not have a degree in education or assessment, right? So lots of them holds a degree in English linguistics or English literature, right? So they don't have background knowledge or training regarding instruction or assessment. So that's part of the problem. Right? That's why we feel that we need more and more training on this. They are very, very able users of the English language, right? They are very proficient, all that, but they lack some theoretical as well as knowledge and background, right, in language teaching and assessment.
Mm-hmm. So that's
why training is always necessary.
Yes, training always is. And so there's, I guess, a follow-up question on that in terms of training, in terms of looking at assessment, hands-on types of things that you mentioned earlier, which is decoding skills, word recognition, and bottom-up listening skills. What are the biggest challenges here, in your view, about the assessment of those decoding skills?
Like any specific, I've noticed there's a lot of specific issues with the speaking, but the listening. So like, is there any specific sounds that Thai students have a difficulty in decoding, or some suprasegmental issues like tones and intonations in English? They have a struggle.
I think they have more problems with pronunciation, right? Pronouncing. lots of sounds in English that do not exist in Thai. Right? That would be, I think, more difficult for them than the decoding part.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah.
So yeah.
But yeah, you just have to make themselves familiar with accents, different accents, or speed as well, right? Right. The natural speed of like native speakers or proficient user of the language, right? Because when sometimes when people develop the test, right, they tend to make the speak more slowly so that make sure the students would able to understand that and catch all the words or meanings, right?
Yeah, I did some item analysis of the listening test score that the Thai University students did. Although I don't have any other like comparison group, so that I know that this is really issue with the Thai students. But they're more tend to struggle with some inference questions in listening test. I think they're not really have problems with identifying some specific details. They're pretty good at those items, but then they tend to struggle a little bit about answering the items about inferencing skills. But I like I said, because I didn't have like other comparison group from the other L1 backgrounds. I cannot say this is really like issues with the Thai students only, but I noticed that those items has a really low item difficulty.
I think
for Thai students, I think receptive skills, right? Better for them, right? Easier for them compared to productive skills, probably because we are part of it in EFL, right? Setting, and they don't have the chance to practice the language much.
So
receptive meaning listening and reading.
And
productive,
yes,
which is talking and writing.
Writing and speaking.
Challenge for us all. And so somebody congratulated you, Parivat congratulated you and Chula's work in terms of workshops and preparing language assessment training for teachers and language instructors. There is a question, however, here about English exit exam policy for undergraduates. So I'm just going to read the question because I'm not quite sure the angle that's being taken. When a policy was established, many universities seem to focus on helping students pass the tests rather than improving their actual English proficiency. I'm just wondering, it says here, whether students' proficiency of English is guaranteed through this policy. That's an interesting question, for sure.
Punchalee, you have many stories about this exit exam,
yes,
right?
At Chula, right? At Chula, yeah, we don't have exit exams. We try to tell the truth, right? Frankly speaking, we try, right? But lots of faculty do not agree with us, right? Because they are afraid that in the end, right, they cannot graduate their students, even though they meet all the requirement of their major subjects, stuff like that, right? But at one time at Chula, instead of the exit exam, we use the CU TEP, right, which is the in-house English proficiency test, right? And we require the students to take the test at the end of their third year, right? So then by that time, we would, right? So we think that it's a good time, right? Not just not when they are about to graduate, but we require them to take the test at the end of the third year so that we have 1 year, right, to help them improve the English language skills further, right? We look at their scores and we set certain levels of scores, and we provide assistance at the Language Institute. For example, if they get the scores low score or certain level, they will have to work at the self-access learning center for 50 hours, right? And then assistance will be provided there, right? They can work on extensive reading, they can work on anything, and they have to record their what the activities that they shows on what we call a passport. It's like a small logbook, right? And to be kept at the center, for example. Right, because the exam policies has been in existence, right? In discussion again and again and again, but we haven't been able to do it yet, right? Yeah. But we feel that, okay, maybe it's better this way. We cannot guarantee the students, we cannot tell them what their language proficiency is like, right, when they're about to graduate. But at least, right, we know, right, beforehand, 1 year before their graduation, right, that if they need help, and we can provide help. But not all students would cooperate, right? They would have excuses like they are busy with their major subjects of studies or anything, right? But there would be some students, right, who would, receive the help that they need. They realize the significance of English. The problem, one problem is that English courses are required courses for first and second year students. But during that time, they are busy with their major subjects, right? The courses of their faculty. And they feel that English is not important. When they realize that they need English to further studies, to increase the chance of getting good jobs, right? In the third year or the fourth year, there are no English courses for them to take, right? That's part of the problems as well.
It's an interesting discussion, because there's somebody who brought up the question of DEIB, which is diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, essentially, gender issues in terms of assessment, equity and inclusion issues. What are some of the discussions in Thailand about that? Because I think, going back to some of your research, and also there's this disparity between Bangkok and the provincial areas. Chulalongkorn is the #1 university, or a very famous university. What about what about assessment elsewhere, or issues of equity and inclusion? What are some of the discussions in Thailand?
Can the participants share their ideas? Because I found I've seen one of the faculty members in Mahasarakam University, who is also an expert in language assessment. And he's working up north in the northeastern part of Thailand, right?
Well, I think some of the things. Is there someone in the audience who would like to say anything about diversity, equity?
Apishat, can you share your experience there?
Absha, I've allowed you to.
Yeah, Apishat, please. Because he would be an expert, because he's been working in the northeastern part of Thailand, right?
Is it near Isan area?
Yes, Isan, yes.
Apishat, go ahead.
Mahasarakam.
Hi, can anybody hear me okay?
Yeah,
Yes,
I can hear you
yes.
very well.
He got a degree in language assessment, right? From University of Melbourne.
With knock.
Okay, thanks you for giving me the opportunity to share the ideas, but I really have no idea. I'll try to think of my experience, okay, in terms of language assessment in my university. I think the problem may be related to, maybe may vary from context to context. I want to give one issues in terms of language assessment in my universities. I think it because we teach so many students in class, so English classroom. So there are lots of students in the classroom, and when it comes to assessment, I think I find it difficult to like, to take really, good care of my students, to like look at my students, to assess students individually, to detect their, progress, individual student progress, because of so many students in the classroom. And I think the problem is that if we have so many students in the classroom, it's really difficult for us to conduct sound assessment in order to accurately and validly, know their learning progress. So that is one of the problems that I experience in my universities. So that's one thing that I like to share in this seminar.
Thank you. That's very thoughtful. It is a challenge that we face, many of us face around the world, and so we hear you. Any thoughts on that, Shin or Punchalee, or any direction that you see the profession, the field of language assessment going in that area of diversity and equity from your end?
Okay, so like we have ILTA, we have International Language Teachers Testers Associations, and award me some fund that traveled to northern Thailand, like Chiang Mai and Chiang Mai, to host a seminar to enhance the assessment literacy among the teachers and researchers there. And I'm also thinking about having some kind of a small conferences or the meetings with those people in the northern Thailand to foster their better understanding of language research and teaching and practices. So that way, you could deal with some diversity or equal access among the people from the rural areas in Thailand. But I also, I don't know if it's not really related, but in Thailand, the university students they wear all school uniforms. So they're kind of equal, at least in the terms of appearance. But definitely there's the other ways to enhance the equality and then dealing with the disparity issues in university educations. Yeah. Any other thoughts, Punchalee?
Yeah, the problem with equity is not just about language assessment. It begins with language learning, right? Because we realize that students have different opportunities when they come to Chula, right? Those who come from, we have students of all backgrounds actually, right? All family backgrounds, all educational backgrounds, all financial statuses, right? And it's not just the issue of assessment, but learning. That's to begin with, right? Actually, last week I helped tutor some students in the programs, right? We call this white elephant programs. So they are so good, right? Because you have to find white elephants. If you want white elephants, you have to go to deep forest. It's not there, right? So for these group of students are very good in their hometown, far away from Bangkok, right? But they may be good at certain subject, but when they come to Chula, they have problems with English, right? One of the students I helped tutor last week, she didn't even know the word able and ability. She cannot tell whether it's a verb, a noun, adjective, right? And when she has to function, right? And she has to study this in the same course as students who get the IELTS score of 8 or CEFR like C1 at least, right? Yeah, it's very difficult. So we try to offer help to everyone, right? I also have a project with the director of the Language Institute, right, to come up with like tutorial courses for these students, right, to help them develop the needed language proficiency, right? Not just right before we can talk about testing, actually. Right?
Yeah, I think some of the things that you're doing already that you mentioned about alternative assessment and classroom-based assessment, all those things I think feed into the question of equity and inclusion. So one of the things, we have just 1 minute left, and I think there's a question about the coming conference in the ASEAN Gateway on the 24th of June, as well as a question about the conference in terms of the collaborative conference in 2025 between IU and Chula. So can you both talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I'll talk about the the upcoming conference, which will be held in Asian Gateway office in Bangkok on June 24th. And the call for papers has been circulated already. The deadline for abstract submission is on May 20th. So among participants, and if you have interesting studies or proposals about ESP teaching and assessment, please send me your abstract to me by May 20th. Punchalee, Punchalee can talk a little bit more about the 2025 LTRC in Bangkok. LTRC is a
Stand for
is a
Language
flagship
Testing
conference.
Research Colloquium, right?
Is a flagship conference. Is the very most prestigious conference about language testing. Is a very we have to make a
Yes.
bid, and we have to compete against the other cities in the world.
Shanghai. We want over
Shanghai.
Shanghai. It's going to be the 45th already for the LTRC, right? Yes, it's the most prestigious, right? And we always tell each other, if you get a chance to present at LTRC, right? That's one of the ultimate goals of your career, right? That you should, get to present. Even big names sometimes can present only the poster sessions, not even right. Not paper presentation, because it's so it's we are very proud actually that in the end, right, we are able to host this, right? And Chula will work closely with Indiana University, right, to organize this conference. And we have experience as well, like back in 2016, right, we hosted AALA, Asian Association of Language Assessment. So it's a kind of practice for us. It's a big thing as well, but for Asia, right? But this time it will be international, global.
The hosting site, so it will be Chulalongkorn University, right?
Black campus. And we encourage Thai, right, participants not just participate in this event, but try to present their abstract for paper presentations and poster presentations. It would be good, right, if we have more Thai participants, right, and presenters.
Right.
Because presenters would come from all over the world, all the big names in language assessment, right?
So with that, thank you again, and we congratulate you for you and Professor Punchalee and Professor Shin for for winning that bid to host LTRC in 2025. It's such a huge feat, and so thank you also for being here today and sharing your thoughts and wisdom with us through the ASEAN Gateway webinar. And thank you everyone who's attended this conference. Stay tuned for the next webinar starting in August again by the IU ASEAN Gateway office. Thank you everyone, and have a good day. Goodbye.
Thank you. Thank you.
ขอบคุณครับ